Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm recording this on June 6th. Thank you for joining. Please help support the work that I do by sharing the links, asking your social media to follow me. You can follow me on X and GETTR, YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. You can also be a paid member to my Patreon channel and my Substack channel. You can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. So I greatly appreciate it. All these videos are for free. I'm a little tired today because I did some traveling back and forth and didn't get back into New York until very late last night, which was like 3:30 in the morning. So I'm a little tired. But thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate if you help support the work that I do by sharing the links and asking your social media to follow me. We're going to go over some news about AI. I was at a symposium in the audience listening to some artificial intelligence research that was going on at Harvard. Very interesting about how their computing cluster is local, and I think it has 1,000 CPUs or GPUs. I'm not sure which. I think it's GPUs, where they're having students do research studies using this computing power to do simulations, very similar to what the Santa Fe Institute was doing in the 90s with complexity science. It was very interesting. One part that I thought was very telling was there was a big part of the audience that didn't like what they were doing. There's a pushback. I'm starting to notice that there's a pushback within the alumni, within the student body, a pushback against AI and AI development. But they're doing some interesting research over at Harvard in regards to AI. So we're going to go over some videos about AI, and we're going to go over some videos about jobs because it's related. So before I do that, please help support the work that I do by taking the great supplements that I offer. These are supplements that I take every day to help slow down the aging process. Now, this is something that I've been on a journey since I was 16 years old. Part of the reason was this heart disease ran in the family. I knew a lot of relatives that passed away at a young age because of heart disease. So I was like very hyper focused about how to improve cardiac health, vascular health, but also how to slow down the aging process. Because I realized at a young age that poor cardiovascular health and other chronic problems can lead to a speed up of aging, an acceleration of aging. So I've been on this journey since I was 16 years old. I'm in my 50s now, so I've learned a few things. Academically, also through my own experience. So if you follow my advice and do what I'm doing, you will slow down the aging process and boost up your immune system and not be as tired when you have long days because you'll have more energy. So let's talk about probiotics first, because that's the first layer. That's the foundation. You want a good gut biome. Now, I have a veggie cap version and a powdered version. I prefer to take the powdered version because I take a lot of different supplements that are in a powdered form, so it's easier for me. The veggie cap version is just as good. So take either the veggie cap version or the powdered version, and what's going to happen is your gut biome is going to improve and you're going to be able to absorb your nutrients. Now, what that will do is improve your skin, improve your brain function, improve your metabolism. You'll have more energy. You'll sleep better. You'll be detoxifying your central nervous system because you're going into those 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. You'll also be able to concentrate better. You'll get rid of that brain fog just by improving your gut biome. And you'll be able to absorb your nutrients better. The lining of your gut will improve. Your immune system of the gut will improve. You'll reduce leaky gut syndrome and therefore reduce the chances of developing allergies. Food allergies, a lot of them are due to gut biome issues and the gut lining. So please go to my store and get the veggie cap version or the powdered version of my probiotics. That's the foundation. Now, the first pillar, let's talk about the second pillar. The second pillar of the protocol is a very strong, very potent antioxidant. You can get it in extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, and MCT coconut oil. Now, C60 is a very potent antioxidant. It's about 1,000 times stronger than a molecule of vitamin C. One molecule of C60. Now, C60 is a carbon molecule, 60 carbons in a buckyball. It's a very strong molecule. It can't be broken apart. And what it does is it neutralizes free radicals because the way the valence electrons float around and shimmer around the molecule, what happens is it's neutralizing the free radical. Now, in a vitamin C molecule, it neutralizes and can't be recharged. So one molecule of vitamin C can only absorb one molecule or one free radical, let's call it that. One free radical to one molecule for vitamin C. C60, it recharges because of the valence shell shimmering from one carbon atom to another in the 60 carbon molecule. And because of that, you're going to be able to absorb and neutralize these free radicals at a much higher rate. You take a teaspoon a day. What this will do is it's going to soak up the free radicals at the cellular level, improve the mitochondrial health. Your ATP is going to start to go up. And because your ATP is going up, you're going to have more energy. And when your cells have more energy, they're going to perform better. In addition, by taking C60, you're bringing down the stress in the cell and in the tissues. So your organ systems are going to perform better. You're going to have more energy. Your organ systems are going to perform better. Therefore, your immune system and your endocrine system is going to perform better. In addition, by soaking up the free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing the concentrations of oxidized LDL. When you have less oxidized LDL, you have less plaque formation. And when you have less plaque formation, you have better blood flow. So by taking C60, you're improving your cardiovascular health, but you're also perfusing your organ systems with the blood it needs, including your brain. So brain function actually improves. Now, C60 also helps with brain function by improving the health of the neuron by soaking up the free radicals, boosting up the health of the mitochondria within the neuron, and allowing the neuron to produce more neurotransmitters, less stress, better positive neuroplasticity that will lead to better cognitive function, better memory. So C60 is a very powerful antioxidant that you should be taking every day, teaspoon a day, every day, preferably on an empty stomach in the morning for best absorption. But take it every day. It also helps the basal layer of your skin. So by improving the health of the basal layer, you'll have better skin cells. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, take C60 every day. If you haven't done it already, as you're taking it, that first 2 months, you're going to start noticing your energy levels are improving. You're slowly improving your immune system and your endocrine system. And over a year period of taking it, you will have a noticeable difference that your health is improving. You're going to notice that you look younger. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. It stacks really well with resveratrol for the basal layer to improve the skin. Now, let's talk about resveratrol before we go to the clips. Resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression. As you get older, you start to methylate genes. And as you methylate those genes, your body isn't producing the proteins it should be in the correct concentrations. Resveratrol also is an antioxidant, so it's going to soak up free radicals and help the health of the mitochondria, so you're going to have more energy. Resveratrol also allows you to get rid of senescent cells. So you're getting rid of cells that stop dividing and are just collecting garbage like lipofuscin. When you do that in tissues that can be regenerated, you're actually improving the tissue. The average age of the cells in the tissue actually go down, so you're younger. So resveratrol stacks really well with C60 for the basal layer for your skin and improving the layer of that basal layer, improving the new cells that are being generated, creating your skin. Your skin has different layers, multitude of layers depending on where you are in the body, but typically 7 layers. But what we can do is by stacking resveratrol and C60 together, you're improving that basal layer, and the skin that cells that are being generated at the basal layer are healthier. So as they build up keratin all the way up to the surface of your skin, they're healthier cells. So you will, with proper diet and exercise and staying away from being sunburned and all this stuff, you're going to actually notice that your skin's improving. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the resveratrol. It stacks really well with C60 to help to get that youthful gene expression. With that, if you use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. You can use it as many times as you want. You know, it's not just once and you can't use it anymore. Every order that you do, make sure you use discount 5. All caps, discount, and then number 5. You get $5 off. With that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description of this video. Now we're going to go to CNN talking about record layoffs driven by AI.
Unfortunately, there was another flurry of pink slips that were handed out in May. And yes, you can see the fingerprints of artificial intelligence. Now, this is coming to us from outplacement firm Challenger Gray and Christmas, and they're reporting that US-based employers, they announced about 97,000 layoffs last month. That is a 16% increase from April. And as you mentioned, this is the highest May total since 2020, back when COVID was crippling the economy. And when you look at the trend, you can see there was this big spike last spring. This was when DOGE was really slashing the federal workforce, also when the president rolled out his global tariffs. Thankfully, announced layoffs, they have come down since then, but they are up 3 months in a row, and they do remain elevated. So where are these announced layoffs? Well, pharmaceuticals, finance, this is fintech. There are about 5,000 to 6,000 each, almost 7,000 in transportation. But look at technology. That really stands out. Almost 40,000 announced layoffs there alone. That's the highest in any month for the tech sector in 3 years. And that's notable because we know tech is adopting artificial intelligence very aggressively.
One of the underlying reasons for this is not just automating using AI so you don't need as many people. The CapEx spending for building out the AI at these companies is becoming much more expensive than they expected because of the tokens. See, a lot of people don't realize that every time you are using this AI LLM and you're developing systems at work, it's taking tokens. And these tokens will cost a certain amount of money. Either you have a plan where it's per token, or you have 10,000 or 100,000 tokens for your monthly budget, or whatever it is. But they're burning through the tokens because they are querying, and every time you are having the computation to take place, you're using up tokens. So if you, let's say, are using an AI model to help to fold proteins, you're using X amount of tokens to do that. And you are given an allotment based on your subscription. Now, some systems are free and that you can only use so many tokens per month. But the reality of the situation here is that many companies are purchasing the tokens and they're noticing that their CapEx is much higher than budget and they're trying to cut costs. So they're seeing, well, if you have employees that aren't as good, get rid of them. Get rid of that 10% of the deadwood, even though our CapEx spending is much higher for the tokenization. So that's another reason why this is happening. It's the cost of the tokens on top of the elimination of some of the jobs because of automation. It's a CapEx story and an automation story.
Founder found that AI was the leading reason why employers announced layoffs in May for the third month in a row. This was the highest total for any month since Challenger started tracking this about 3 months ago. And when you look at the trend for announced layoffs that are being blamed on AI, you can see this trend is clearly going in the wrong direction, right? So far this year, companies have announced almost 90,000 layoffs that they blamed, at least in part, on artificial intelligence. That far surpasses the total from last year, and we're only not even halfway done with this year. However, what's less clear is how many companies are actually laying off workers because of artificial intelligence, and how many are just saying that because it sounds better than telling shareholders customers just aren't buying our products as much anymore. So there's a lot of debate over that, and Goldman Sachs has said that they found pretty limited impact so far from artificial intelligence on the labor market. And it's also worth noting there are some other indicators out there that paint a more positive picture about the economy and the job market. For example, jobless claims, they do remain low. That's one that economists pay very close attention to. Job openings, they rebounded in April to a nearly 2-year high. There's now more job openings than job seekers. We haven't seen that since June. And private hiring in May rebounded to the fastest pace that we've seen in 16 months. So there is a bit of a mixed picture here. And Brianna, hopefully we get some more clarity on Friday when the official government jobs report for the month of May gets released.
This morning, OpenAI facing a lawsuit brought by the state of Florida, really the first of its kind, saying ChatGPT is dangerous for children, helps mass shooters, and encourages suicide. With us now, CNN's Adas Gold, who covers all things AI. So what's unique about this? What's going on here? What does it mean?
This is the first time that a state has brought a civil lawsuit, not just against OpenAI, but against OpenAI CEO Sam Altman personally. And what Florida is alleging here, they say that ChatGPT was marketed as family-friendly, as safe for everyone, when actually they accuse OpenAI of knowing that ChatGPT was dangerous and prioritizing what they called profit over safety. They go through a litany of accusations here. They say that OpenAI knew ChatGPT was unsafe for children, that it helped mass shooters, encourages suicide, has caused public humiliation, that it addicts minors to a tool that they say has very little to no parental oversight, and that it causes minors to lose what they called critical thinking skills. Essentially, all of the criticisms we've heard about ChatGPT, about AI chatbots, they put in.
You're going to have a generation that doesn't know how to think. Now, you're going to have Ph.D.s that are using AI as simulations to speed up their experiments. So you're still going to have critical thinking at that level. But the average student that's coming out that's using ChatGPT, I'm sorry, the critical thinking is going to go down. Same thing's going to happen in an older workforce. The more you use it, you're going to lose those important skills like critical thinking, being able to learn being able to read and write properly, being able to discern what's important from what you read, being able to read large amounts of information. People that use AI, they're going to lose the critical thinking skills. They're going to start losing the endurance for reading. And what's going to happen is you're going to have a dumber society. So that's that problem. Then you have the issues with minors and the harmful effects of AI, but also at the research level. Early on, if you go back to the early experimentation for gain-of-function research in pathogens, there wasn't at the very beginning, there wasn't a protocol that protected the public from what they were doing until they actually had a conference and they convened and they came up with biosafety protocol. And hence we have these categories like BSL 1 through 4, right? Depending on what you're doing, depends on what kind of lab you're in. And certain protocols that are supposed to be followed but aren't being followed, but they're supposed to be followed, where if you are doing recombinant GOF, gain of function research, they use multiple plasmids to reduce the probability of some sort of escape, right? So that you have this protocol that was developed over many seminars that allowed for biocontainment during research. Now, fast forward to what we're doing in AI. Well, mankind doesn't really have a BSL version for AI. Just like there wasn't a BSL version of containment in the early days of manipulating cells and pathogens. I don't know of anyone that's talking about this. Maybe they are. It doesn't seem that academia has a strict protocol that states this type of AI modeling has to be in this type of AI containment lab to prevent escape. If it's something really benign, then it's a AIL, so AI lab, AIL1. Something benign, no big deal. But if you start doing something that could cause havoc, like mythos, that's like an AIL4, where it has to have heavy duty containment protocols to prevent that AI model from going out and causing problems. So I see in the future not only the psychological effects of AI on the youth and on older workers declining their skill set, which is a major problem, but also cyber issues, especially when the AI can learn to produce information, take that information, do a feedback loop to produce new information. So you have this need for containment depending on what kind of AI model is being developed. So that's another big issue that I think the AI researchers aren't really paying attention to too much. Now, Anthropic is talking about, well, we create this model and we tested it out with some companies in a closed environment and started noticing that it's a problem. All right, and we're patching it up. Well, what about researchers in laboratories at these universities writing these papers or working with the Defense Department? How do you prevent an AI model leak that could be used for cybercrime or for a rogue nation to shut down an energy grid of some other nation? This is going to be a problem. We will, just like we have biocontainment for research, for pathogens, you're going to need AI lab containment.
To this lawsuit that's really alleging negligence and product liability. Take a listen to the Florida Attorney General.
Sam Altman and ChatGPT have chosen the AI race over the safety and security of our kids. They have chosen profit over public safety. And we're not going to stand for it here in Florida.
So I do want to get to what OpenAI.
If you're not using a business travel platform like Navan, you're really missing out. Hi, I'm Ellie, and I'm the People Operations Specialist at Media. Navan is a business travel platform that makes money.
So I do want to get to what OpenAI has said in response to this. And they say that they believe minors do need significant protection, which is why they've put in place what they call industry-leading protections and policies. In particular, they say they built safety for minors directly into our products, including a more protective experience specifically for minors, an age prediction tool, and defaulting users whose age we are not confident into our more protective experience, and giving parents the tools to monitor their kids' use of AI. But in this lawsuit, Florida is saying that those tools don't actually do enough, don't give parents enough insight to what their children are doing, don't alert parents to when there might be concerning behavior. And they say that there's not really good age gating on these tools. This is really interesting because Florida has set itself apart in terms of how aggressive they're willing to go against these AI companies, specifically OpenAI. Because if you remember back in April, Florida and the same attorney general launched the first ever criminal investigation into an AI company. They accused ChatGPT of essentially aiding and abetting the man accused of that mass shooting at Florida State University last year, killed 2, injured 6. And the Florida attorney general said if ChatGPT had been a human being on the other end of that screen, they would have been criminally involved. And so it's really interesting to see how Florida is deciding to go the route of lawsuits versus government regulation, because there's a bit of a tension between the federal government has tried to prevent states from issuing their own rules and regulations over AI. So instead, Florida, it's going through the courts to try and get something done.
Any legal decision that we get on these issues going forward will really be precedent setting. I think we're all looking for signs about which way it's going.
As Florida sues OpenAI and rival Anthropic gives it some major competition, the head of the artificial intelligence pioneer has a big day in Washington. A source confirms OpenAI CEO Sam Altman is having high-level meetings today at the White House and on Capitol Hill. Altman's visit comes a day after President Donald Trump signed an executive order designed to tighten cybersecurity. Well, it is the latest in a string of AI headlines, including highly anticipated IPOs like Anthropic's, which we discussed here on the show yesterday, and we are of course, keeping an eye on these tech stocks. These continue to drive markets in whichever direction those markets are going. Today, most of them trading slightly lower. In fact, NVIDIA and Microsoft trading down 3% and 2.5% there, respectively. I want to bring in our AI correspondent, Hadas Gold, for you now. Hadas, I want to talk about why it is that Sam Altman is going to Washington today. What is he hoping to get out of these meetings, and who is he meeting?
Yeah, so Sam Altman will be both at the White House and he'll be at Capitol Hill. And though this was planned before that executive order was signed yesterday, that will obviously be one of those conversations. That executive order was one of the first times we're seeing from the Trump administration tiptoeing, not so much into regulation. They made it clear this is not mandatory, but into the government having a much more involved aspect to these new AI models that are coming out, especially when we're seeing some of them, like Anthropic Mythos, are having some crazy cybersecurity capabilities. It's like having millions of hackers or cybersecurity defenders working for you. This executive order that was signed yesterday asks these AI companies that create these frontier models, these advanced models, to voluntarily submit these models to the government for a review period of up to 30 days before they release them to others. Now, Sam Altman praised this executive order in a post on X, but the conversation team will be having today with the White House will likely go into the sort of nitty-gritty details of this executive order. A lot of it is about definitions and also where they go from here, because the White House has announced this national framework on AI, and there's a lot of work left to do. He's expected to talk about safety policy, where the models are going next, and cyber capabilities, especially with all of these officials across Washington. We also understand that he's going to be meeting with bipartisan members of Congress on Capitol Hill, especially those members who have introduced legislation about AI, including Senator Bernie Sanders, who has introduced this American AI Sovereign Wealth Fund Act, which wants to give the public a 50% ownership stake in major AI companies. And Senator Sanders is also pushing for a moratorium on AI data centers. Obviously, we can't have any of these AI models without data centers. They are so hungry for more data centers. They're talking about sending data centers to space. And so Sam Altman will be talking with Senator
Have you
Sanders.
noticed that there's not a lot of discussion in the mainstream media about climate change as much as we used to. Because data centers need to use up a lot of energy. And you're going to be running those data centers on nuclear, on coal, on natural gas.
Obviously probably trying to get them to pull back a little bit, or at least modify this legislation in a way that OpenAI thinks that they can live with.
This is happening, of course, as we wait for OpenAI to file to go public, after Anthropic, of course, has filed its IPO on Sunday. I mean, these two are massive competitors. We're also on a hair trigger for SpaceX to file its own. Is there enough capital for all three of these tech giants to succeed in their IPOs this year? I mean, does OpenAI in any way, do you believe, risk falling behind at this point?
Yeah, it's a big question. Everyone's been waiting for these huge IPOs. We're talking about potentially $1 trillion IPOs each, and it's going to be a wild few days of trading.
Think about it.
First,
SpaceX, they're going to put data centers in the sky. They're also going to be working with the Defense Department, right? Huge potential for telecommunications and having their own cellular network through Skylink. Anthropic, they're making money. OpenAI doesn't make any money yet. So is there really a future for AI, OpenAI? Or is it, we're going to see it more in the business model of Anthropic? Think about OpenAI. They're competing with Gemini. They're competing with Grok. Probably the ones that are in the AI that are going to drop off or be second tier will be OpenAI and Meta. And the ones that are going to flourish will be Anthropic, Palantir. I see if more money goes into Grok, Grok will supersede OpenAI. So in terms of IPOs, probably a safer bet to go into SpaceX and Anthropic and dump OpenAI. I think it's too risky, OpenAI. Plus, Sam Altman, I don't trust as the CEO.
this one to drop SpaceX is expected, I believe, sometime next week. Anthropic's filing was their confidential S1, so it's not fully, an IPO just yet. And OpenAI, we are expecting anytime soon. This will be the first time that retail investors will really get to have a piece of this AI boom. And a lot of critics have been questioning, though, whether the funding is outpacing real world demand. And actually, these filings and through going public and earnings reports will finally get to have a look under the hood at what's actually happening at these companies. What does the financing look like? What are the business practices? Now, analysts are saying that these three IPOs represent the largest concentration of pre-IPO capital ever brought to the market simultaneously. So, can the market handle it? Some experts are saying yes, it can. The Economist just published something that says there's lots of investors out there. It's an extraordinarily deep and liquid market. Of course, we'll have to wait and see how the market reacts to these IPOs. As for OpenAI, I think a lot of people were expecting them to go right after SpaceX and then Anthropic to file. I think some people were shocked when Anthropic filed their S1 before OpenAI. And Sam Altman was actually asked about this directly, and he brushed it off, saying that they'll go public when they're ready. He alluded that they're still planning to this year. And some people actually suggest that it's smart for OpenAI to wait, to let Anthropic sort of, absorb some of the initial shock, maybe some of the regulatory, inquiries, because it could give OpenAI a chance to see how the market reacts to them, see how the regulatory industry reacts to them, and then maybe they can quietly restructure things, they can gauge the appetite instead of being, the first to walk into the battlefield.
Yeah, keeping a keen eye on these IPOs, not least because from this region, the Gulf wealth is and will be heavily invested, there is no doubt, as this region builds its AI investments and capabilities. It's been fascinating to watch that happen here in the UAE.
Sovereign wealth funds from the Middle East, I think, are going to be major players. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost helps with a multitude of different systems. It helps to build muscle, improve your cardiovascular health, improve brain function, rev up your energy levels, boost up your immune system and your endocrine system. Take this every day. It's a very comprehensive supplement that will slow down the aging process, and you're going to get healthier over time. And you're going to notice the effects of it within 72 hours. You're going to notice you have that steady burn of energy, no spiking, and you're taking it every day. You're going to notice that all these different systems are going to improve. Now, you can stack it with or take separately the barley. I have two types of barley. The heirloom barley, which will detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. Help the immune system and the endocrine system, help with joint health, reduce that inflammation, help with brain function and the cardiovascular system by bringing down that inflammation and soaking up those free radicals. So you can take this every day separately, or you can stack it, which I highly recommend with the Boomer Boost to get that synergistic benefit to help slow down the aging process and help to control your A1C levels. Now, both of these containers are a month's supply. Some people take a full scoop of Boomer Boost, some people take a half scoop. If you take a half scoop, it'll last approximately 2 months. Now, Gladiator barley is very similar to heirloom barley, but it has one added benefit. So you still detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, get all that benefit from that. But this also helps to build muscle. And you can stack it with the Boomer Boost or take them separately. I recommend stacking because there is a synergistic benefit. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Boomer Boost, get the Gladiator barley or the heirloom barley. If you want, stack them together. Really important. Boomer Boost to Gladiator barley or Boomer Boost to heirloom barley, or you just take them separately. It's up to you. But this, if you take it regularly, you're going to be able to improve all these different organ systems and slow down the aging process. It's very simple. You take this and you will get healthier. It doesn't need to be overly complicated. But, some people don't pay attention. Please go to my store, get the Boomer Boost, stack it with the Gladiator barley or the heirloom barley. And if you want to save some money, use discount 5. And if you want to save even more money, go to my longevity box boost, and you'll be able to save money because that longevity boost box gives you the option of heirloom barley or Gladiator barley stacked with Boomer Boost. So that's a great way to save money. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description. Now we're going to go over a clip where Bloomberg was interviewing BlackRock's CEO talking about jobs report and AI.
Rick, great to have you on Friday Jobs Day, and especially on one with such good news for the labor market and for the U.S. economy. What do you make of the non-farm payrolls?
So, Matt, it's a solid number. And I think one thing I always find it interesting when you get the top line, but then it's like markets, like all the money is when you get underneath the surface. It's a fascinating report in a couple of different regards. When you actually look at it, so, we know healthcare, we talk on the show all the time. Healthcare, good again, check. Local government was a big number this month, so it was about 50,000 jobs, local government. So what do you do with that? Interesting, that tends to move around, obviously. But then when you get underneath the surface, I find it fascinating, a couple of things. Construction was strong. Why is that? And you dig into construction and you look at it, non-residential construction is strong, meaning AI, build out, which we know is coming, which we know is happening, and will continue to come. And then you look at underneath, and you look at real estate softer, and then you look at resi residential softer. And then the thing I also thought was fascinating, I think you mentioned the finance jobs softer. Then you dig into finance, what's happening? Insurance was pretty soft, which is a trend you've been seeing. Why is that? It's AI sensitive. These are the areas and services where you're going to start to see the softness. You're going to start to see AI start to press on the areas where you can create some real efficiencies, real productivity. So net solid number. Things like food and drinking. I don't know what was happening that created that sort of fire. That was solid. You got to factor that in your equation. So anyway, point being, I think you got to factor in an economy that's doing quite well. You've got an AI. You've got a big cylinder of AI that you see show up in construction, and you see that what companies are doing that are starting to implement. So, you know, and I think you got to think of the Fed's reaction function. The data so far is solid, and you got to build that into your positioning.
I mean, I don't know about what people were doing with food and drink. I guess some celebration with indexes at all-time highs. I'm always tracking G-body 911s. Even the 997s are at prices that I just can't believe. There's a lot of cash out there, Rick. I look at credit, right? The ag at 30-year tights right now. Where is all this cash coming from?
You know, Matt, you brought up, there are a couple of very relevant statistics today. I mean, the money market fund number is extremely high. By the way, I stare at it. It's one of the numbers I stare at every week, and the inflows in the money market funds just keeps coming. By the way, you got a strong economy that is supporting that. So you got money market inflows, bank deposits, very solid. The other thing that you see that happens, we track in the market, you know, why is all the supply well subscribed in fixed income? You know, you see the pension demand, the life insurance demand, you're at yields. If you're matching a liability, you've got yields that are pretty attractive, you know, even though spreads aren't that interesting. So you've got two big pockets of demand, you know, particularly for fixed income. And then for equities, you know, I've said it before, even though you're getting an IPO calendar, so a little bit of digestion, you have so much in the way of buyback that the net supply of equities is just not that large. So, you know, not to say you can't pull back on numbers like this or war-related issues, but the technicals underlying the equity market are pretty solid as well.
So the jobs data is predicated on the AI build-out for the hyperscalers. Well, wait a minute here. What about the other jobs out there? And according to CNN, they're not doing so well, especially in tech. Right? Because there's a lot of layoffs. So, how healthy really is the economy? I'm not sure. You know, once these inflows start to slow down, then you're probably going to start seeing a little bit of a potential tipping into a recession.
You know, when you come on, Rick, my IB just lights up. Viewers writing in about 1,000 questions here, so get ready. What's your view on all the investment grade data center issuance? Is it overweight because that's the future, right? Because that's the dream and it's going to come true, or are you being more cautious because you see so many more deals?
It's a great question. So one, I think you got to build that into your duration, your interest rate exposure you take in a portfolio today. Meaning you got to supply. You know, we talked about there's a lot of treasury supply that comes. There's a lot of financing that's coming to support this data center bill that just showed up in the employment report today. So I think you got to think about how much interest rate exposure do I have today when you're pushing a lot of supply in the market. Maybe I run a little bit less rate exposure, which I think makes a ton of sense. And then, listen, I think it's mixed. I mean, some of it, quite frankly, some of the supply in investment grade is okay. You know, there's, you know, because people don't have a lot, you get some demand for that. But, you know, some that comes in convert form, very interesting. If you get equity upside alongside of it and a coupon, that I think is super interesting. And then, you know, quite frankly, some of the quasi-private, you know, some of the more off-the-run data center finance, that I find more interesting than just the regular way auctioned investment grade debt.
Let me also ask about, I had a trader write in, Anthony Santos Stefano, about the Japanese yen when we got this jobs number across, because it gives strength, right, to the dollar. That makes the yen weaker. Right now we're at 160.07, and they've already blown through like $75 billion in foreign exchange reserves. If they go in to defend this here, they're going to have to sell more treasuries, right? What does that do to yields?
So, I would say a couple of things to that end. A, when we look at US rates, I think the thing you got to respect today, you get the Bank of Japan that's raising rates, the ECB, the RBI, the Bank of Canada. So you're in a cycle today, and you've got a fiscal dynamic that I think you have to respect if you're in the US rates market. So that's one part of it. Listen, again, we spent a bunch of time looking at it, and how much risk do you take in JGBs, and how do you hedge it? Listen, I think one of the things, we need, Bank of Japan's been a bit deliberate on moving rate like they need to in terms of getting that rate up. And so obviously the derivative impact, you see that play out in the currency. So listen, we follow it obviously closely with positions in it, and we look, we watch it pretty carefully. And I think, listen, there's one thing that is beneficial. One of the ways I think Japan is very interesting is on the equity side. Like I think, we see that sort of price action in yen, and you think about the beneficiary thereof. Listen, I like Japanese equities. Rates is a tough, particularly front end rates, is a pretty tough trade.
What are you doing in Bink right now, Rick? You've been outperforming the market in your ETF. What moves are you making that you can share with maybe your competitors who are watching?
Thanks for that.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform.
Thanks for that. I'd say a couple of things. Listen, I think, we've moved our interest rate exposure sympathetic to get a strong economy. We reduced a decent amount of interest rate exposure. Some of the negatively convex, the rates, agency mortgages, which, is a good asset class. We like it. Today, maybe we want to be, and, we have been a bit more cautious about that space. I like Europe in a relative basis. Europe's already priced in the hikes. We get the debate that they have a lot more to do. I think European fixed income is quite interesting because you've already priced in the hikes. And so that, we like that quite a bit. And then EM, obviously you got to manage the currency and think through it. But actually, I'd say we've been pretty neutral on EM, but, we have, higher exposure in EM than we've had historically, albeit that's not a huge position for us. But big moves, watch your negative convexity and interest rates. Europe's got it more priced in than the US, and that's we think the balance and the carry that comes from Europe is fits a portfolio nicely.
Does the war make any difference to your investment strategy? I mean, if we just sit in a ceasefire where we shoot at each other for months and oil holds around 100, does that matter?
Yeah, what really matters for the markets today, is obviously what the forwards are going to be in oil. So you think about what are your inflation break evens and how do you. So we watch the forwards pretty carefully in terms of where that goes. So yes, that's important. If you stay in a range, markets, to your point that you made earlier, there's so much cash in the market. As long as you believe that it's in this stasis, even if it is similar to the Ukrainian situation, the market's generally okay. It's the shocked that it's going to move one way or another in a significant fashion that obviously you've got to be sympathetic to on portfolio. I will say we built a lot of, what's happened recently, volatility's come down in the equity market pretty markedly, not so much single name, but in index. And so now you can just start to use volatility to protect your left tail, to protect the downside in the equity market. So, we've done some of that, particularly when you have, the news around it is we're not really going anywhere.
I'm looking at the forward curve on Brent. Anyone can do this on the Bloomberg terminal, by the way. Just type CT for the contract table on a commodity, and I see we don't get below 80 until 27. What about SpaceX? What about an IPO that sucks that much liquidity out of the market, especially if you have 3 of them in a row? Does it matter to fixed income?
It definitely matters to equities. And I was thinking our equity portfolio. Whenever you're we think about, a name like this and it's a name we've been involved with and others are involved with. And so, you got to think about it within the portfolio and think about, how much, what else do you own and how do you manage that? Or when you think about new issue that comes like this. So it obviously matters to supply and demand in the equity market. In the rates market, the fixed income market, I think there's one thing that does, equities have taken you to such an elevated position. If you're a pension, a foundation, endowment, and then now you get to a place where you're fully funded in some places. And when rates back up, your real rates, now we're at levels that are pretty darn attractive if you're defeasing a long-dated liability stream. So, I think what a lot of people are thinking about, like, boy, this has been a pretty positive, pretty powerful period for equities, including some names within the portfolio, names that are doing well. You know, fixed income, when you keep elevating these rates and you think about your real rate and gosh, with inflation, even if inflation is running a bit elevated, if you can build portfolios, similar to what we do in bank, if you can create 6.5, 6.75 yield, boy, it's pretty attractive.
I mean, it seems like AI isn't just bullish the economy, but changes the trajectory at which we operate, if they're true.
Listen, I went through the data and I talked about a presentation I gave where I looked at, if you take AI related the last 3 years, it's about 28% of the growth of an economy that's a well over $30 trillion economy. You think about how big that, how can that be? And by the way, about 70% of the return of the S&P. And then you think about every part of the economic ecosystem today. You think about how the AI, the spend and the CapEx, and then, per the number today, you look at the companies that are starting to adopt it and how it impacts everything. And right, we talk about insurance, we talk about the impact that's having on some of these services, software, et cetera. Boy, it's become, the thing I would suggest though, you have an economy that's operating on that cylinder and the rest of the economy is just okay. I was talking about small business, not great, young people, lower income, not great. But boy, that part of the ecosystem is, the numbers are mind blowing. Every day including weekends, we get calls on financing that's got to come to the market. It has become pretty impressive.
Well, and we see, you were talking about construction jobs, Rick. It doesn't seem as concentrated as the naysayers are worried about. Like, we look at companies that do HVAC, that make boilers, and they're rallying hard. Ford Motor Company has become an AI play because it makes big batteries that data centers can use. Caterpillar, Deere, all of these old economy. Yesterday we saw the Dow up, the Dow Jones Industrial Average up 900 points. What do you think of this rotation?
So I think there's a lot that makes sense of what you said. So you think about, there was the first level, you think about semis, you think about the direct beneficiaries, and then you look at things like electrical equipment, you mentioned cooling, like the infrastructure build. Like, I think the thing that makes sense with people are starting to count, you're seeing the numbers of these companies that are reporting, the companies that are tangential to AI, or maybe not anymore, maybe their business actually, and some of them has become directly top line revenue related to AI. Like, that's where, quite frankly, the multiples are not as egregious today. And power, and that there is the demand function for those products. And by the way, related to space, you look at the components there as well. Like, those companies become pretty interesting today as people start to think about, okay, I need to diversify a little bit. I've got concentrated risk in some of the parts of my equity portfolio. Yeah, I think it's real. But again, it gets to the point of, like, you got one big cylinder that's driving so much of the economy today.
It is driving so much, though, and I think that's the point. Are there areas that AI is going to miss, Rick? Are there industries that you're worried are left behind? Do you worry about AI eating jobs in some places?
I think, people talk about the K-shaped economy, and I actually think that visual is not that great because it suggests that the lines are equivalent on both sides. I actually think that the economy today is more like a 3-month-old birthday cake. The icing's great, but then you look underneath it, which is the bulk of it, and it's actually not doing so well. The thing that is tricky today is I think you're going to displace a lot of workers. Mm-hmm. And I think, part of what the Fed's job otherwise is be a bit anticipatory of where we're going and how it affects the broad population at large. And I think, obviously we and every company uses AI aggressively. And you think about, including this morning, I was going through with a member of the team, gosh, I can do this now, I can do that now, I don't need to go to. It is going to change the ecosystem, and you're seeing productivity that's heretofore kicked in. By the way, robotics, automation, all powered by that same ecosystem. I think where we're going, and by the way, when you think about the economy today, you've also got a big fiscal tailwind. When you think about where we're going the next few months, I think you'll have somewhat different disposition around that. So anyway, the point I would make, if you're the Fed, I think you got to pull back. Maybe you're on hold. Like say, I position for what could be a Fed that's more hawkish. But gosh, I think you got to think about where are we today, what's being impacted in the economy, the people in the economy, and then and give it a bit of time to evaluate the condition.
But are you saying? It looks like we're adding so many jobs, and inflation is still way too high. You don't want to be cutting, right? You kind of, if anything, you have to raise into this, don't you?
So my personal view is when you look at the broad construct and you look at what the interest rate tool really impacts, is it affecting the AI spend? Is it affecting the infrastructure? Is it really influencing, does you move the discount rate, does it really influence the hyperscaler demand? Really not. It influences housing, where you're seeing that. It influences obviously small business, where you're seeing it. You look at credit card charge-offs. Anyway, so what do you do with that? I think you got to take the whole equation and say, my personal view is, well, obviously inflation is above target. Obviously growth, fiscal tailwind is solid. I think you just got to give it a little bit of time. You wouldn't cut obviously into this. Do you need to hike into it? And by the way, you look at Europe. Europe's going to hike into a supply shock. You look at the data in Europe around consumer confidence, NEW, like you're seeing a tangible slowdown. I just think if you're a central bank, you got to be a bit anticipatory of, I heard somebody say the other day, what happens with commodities, price adjusts commodities and demand adjusts in terms of what happens. And I think you just got to be a bit thoughtful and look at the whole picture when you make that decision. And, quite frankly, I think going forward, I think Chair Warsh, be very thoughtful about, do you have to keep moving the funds rate around to tweak small moves, particularly when it's supply shock driven? My perception would be, my perspective would be, look at the whole construct. You don't have to constantly adjust and be thoughtful about where the puck is going.
Hey, we've been talking a lot on this program over the last week, Rick, and over the last several months about pulling money out of private credit, and now it seems to have spread to private equity, and then redemption gates coming down. We talked about Cliffwater, right? 17% withdrawal requests. You had Partners Group seeing that creep over into private equity. Yesterday, you had Blackstone talking about redemptions and gates as well. It seems to be the only crack here that I see in financial markets. Is that a concern?
No, not. I mean, not. So is it a concern idiosyncratically? Yes, in some parts. We talked a lot about software, et cetera. Is it a systemic shock? No, but I've gone through, where you have, first of all, it's term financed, versus you go back to the financial crisis that was largely overnight funded. So no, it's not systemic, and the sheer size of it is not that large. What, quite frankly, is done for portfolios and how we think about investing, the needle has moved around opportunities. If you go back the last few years, there was so much money floating around that privates were trading at very rich levels in credit. And now the opportunity set is much more robust. I mean, now you've created normalcy, which I think is awesome. Like now, all of a sudden, you have, the dynamic of if you've got an illiquid asset, you should get compensated for that. And now you're starting to see that into the equation. So no, I'm not worried about the systemic at all. In some names where you have debt that needs to be rolled, you got to be, obviously, you got to watch it, but definitely not from a systemic crack in the system. I'm not worried about it.
So I'm going to talk to Kevin Hassett on the other side of this break, Rick. What would you ask him right now? I mean, you mentioned the cake-shaped economy. What questions do you put to Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think,
This is Pocket. I never go anywhere without it. At the tap of a button, it records and creates organized notes based on your conversations. I use it at work, at the doctor.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been very thoughtful. I just saw a headline about, listen, I think you have to, think about the broad picture and give the system some time and think about what the interest rate tool does versus liquidity versus balance sheet. Listen, I think that's really important, to think about, how do you think about, there's a lot of treasury issuance that's got to come to the market. You got to make sure that the back end of the yield curve is contained. How would you think about that? How would the Fed think about that? To me, I mean, financial velocity today, it's not really created by the overnight funds rate. It's out the yield curves where it finance commercial real estate, residential, corporate. Like that's a really big deal. And, hearing, how does the administration think about that? How will the Fed think about that? He's very thoughtful on these things.
The new chair, Kevin Warsh, in 2024 said central bankers around the world seem to be more comfortable with inflation closer to 3% than I wish were the case. That's very dangerous stuff. We can have an economic boom in that scenario, but there will be a high price to pay. Do you think this central bank is comfortable with inflation where it is?
And so I think there's something that's important, the momentum of inflation and what is driving it. So if you look at the rate sensitive parts of the economy today, and we break down inflation, you say, what's rate sensitive? Obviously, shelter is rate sensitive. We need to build more houses in this country. Obviously, take things like used cars. What's interest rate insensitive, things like healthcare, education, insurance, those are sticky high. But that interest rate tool doesn't really do a lot with it. You know, it gets to this point about the headline versus what actually is happening. And I think you just got to factor in, if you're a central bank, if you have a supply shock where that should abate over time, and if your tool isn't really effective for some of it, then I just think you have to think about what is your tool doing? Maybe the monetary base should be adjusted, maybe the balance sheet. But I think you got to have a broader discussion around it. Listen, today, I think the central bank's inflation is above target. You got to wait. Maybe DCB hikes a bit. But I just think the simplistic top line answer for these, which are complex subjects, I think is a bit superficial at times.
Well said. So, in summary, artificial intelligence is affecting the job market in two ways. One, the build out for the hyperscalers. So you have construction, but you also have layoffs that are taking place in certain industries because of the cost of the CapEx and the tokens, running the tokens. And I honestly believe that many companies that are trying to implement AI in their processes did a poor job in budgeting for that tokenization. They're seeing elevated costs, and therefore they're being told to reduce the usage, but also they're telling business managers to start shedding employees because of it. Now, in terms of the Federal Reserve, at the macro level, we have an inflationary problem because of elevated oils. We also have this concern in the bond market of elevated prices at the belly of the curve, especially the 10-year. But in recent trading days, it has been going down. The Federal Reserve most likely will be on hold, waiting this out instead of raising rates. You don't want to raise rates in the middle of an oil crisis. They'll exacerbate the problem. And the overall economy doesn't seem to be as strong as people think. That's my takeaway from it. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. This is the third pillar of the protocol. It's a very powerful stack. If you do this, you're going to slow down the aging process. Lignans. You can take this separately, and what this will do is soak up free radicals, bring down inflammation, help the immune system and the endocrine system, but also the cardiovascular system and the brain function. So it helps to slow down the aging process. Lignans is very important to take. It's a powder. You can also take separately the turmeric. Soaks up free radicals and brings down inflammation. You get the same benefits. Help in the immune system, the endocrine system, the cardiovascular system, brain function, even joint health. Ashwagandha root controls the cortisol levels and the blood glucose levels. Brings down inflammation, especially at the vascular level. You're boosting up your immune system. It's powerful. Now you can take these three supplements separately, but the magic is to take them together. You take them together, what's going to happen is just that they work synergistically to slow down the aging process. And that's the reason why it's the third pillar of my protocol. First pillar, or the foundation, the probiotics. The first pillar on top of that foundation is the Max 35 cleanse or Max 14 to boost up the innate immune system. Second pillar, we talked about the C60, soaks up free radicals. The third pillar, the lignans, the turmeric, and the ashwagandha. And the fourth pillar, the boomer boost, to rev up those energy levels, but you get lots of other benefits, especially when you stack them together. The magic with supplements is they work together to slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Again, if you just want to get the turmeric, that's fine. But you do get benefits by stacking it with ashwagandha root and lignans. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. So please go to my store, use discount 5, all caps, and you get $5 off. All right, let's go to Bessent. Blast Elizabeth Warren. Let's see what happened during the hearing, the Senate hearing.
9% of our small and community banks disappeared since the great financial crisis. Senator Warren likes to say, ooh, we might have a bank failure. She killed 45% of the small banks.
I think it's safe to say that you have probably worked as hard as anyone over the last 18 months, and no one has done more for the American people than this administration and this Treasury Department. Mr. Secretary, when President Trump took office, what were the biggest economic challenges facing the administration?
Well, we inherited a mess. We've had the worst inflation in 49 years, and I think in many ways the worst for working people in our nation's history, because someone was asking me about the inflation indices earlier, that's the average for working families, that it is thought that many of their goods and services inflated as much as 35%, with an 18% wage gain. So the loss in purchasing power was tremendous. We were running the biggest deficit to GDP that we'd ever run, 6.7, 6.9%, when we were not at war, not in a recession. And we had to get that under control. And then everything that was happening to our American workers, from the border being open, and whether it was safety or jobs being taken.
So since January last year, what would you say that the largest economic indicators have been showing the greatest improvement?
I would say that every month except this past April, we've seen real wage increases. We've seen on average 2.6% GDP growth for the past 4 quarters. And the underlying resilience of the economy, we pulled down the fiscal deficit to GDP. We got it down to about 5.5%. So we had a fiscal contraction and still grew, and represented everything that all the jobs we were creating, they're in the private sector and they're for Americans.
I appreciate you saying that, because the previous administration often pointed to job growth as evidence of economic success, but much of that growth, as you just mentioned, came from the government hiring. So can you explain the difference between an economy that is driven by government job creation versus that in the private sector?
Well, we see the productivity go up, but more importantly, for the people who are getting those jobs, that they're very difficult to create real wage increases. Traditionally, government jobs are indexed to the CPI, so you're just keeping up. With private sector, people can move up, and we are creating, with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we're having a building boom in manufacturing structures. And that if someone's economically illiterate said to me, well, where are all these manufacturing jobs? Well, manufacturing jobs take time. As in my hometown of Charleston, South Carolina, Boeing is expanding their facility there by 50%. It's the Dreamliner production facility. So first you get construction jobs, then you get 1,000 high-paying jobs in the Boeing factory, and we're seeing that again and again.
Well, I think the goal of public policy shouldn't be to make government dependency more comfortable, right? But it should be to make economic independence more attainable. And so would you agree that the most effective way to improve a family's financial situation is not through government assistance, but through higher wages and better job opportunities?
100%. And the opportunity to start your own business. And that's what we're seeing too, that in terms of Main Street coming back, that one of the things, I spent my career in the financial sector, and 45% of our small and community banks disappeared since the great financial crisis. Senator Warren likes to say, ooh, we might have a bank failure. She killed 45% of the small banks.
I think the Trump administration is rightly focused on creating the conditions for private sector growth and for private sector hiring, because every new private sector job represents an American who is less dependent on government and more empowered into their own future. And I think as Congress considers policies that encourage work and reduce dependency, I do believe that we have a responsibility to connect people with opportunities. So I'm going to ask you, what are you doing on August 6th?
I'm not even sure what I'm doing.
Let me tell you, for the fifth consecutive year, I am hosting what has become the nation's largest job fair. Last year, we had over 500 businesses that represented over 33,000 jobs, and we had about 35,000 people came last year to Globe Life Field, and we're going to do it again this year, August 6th. And we would love to have you there. I'm formally inviting you right now to attend. Because if you want to know about economic policy, don't ask anybody in Washington. Ask the single mom who now has a job that pays the bills. Ask a vet who now finds a new career.
It's as simple as making sure we have capitalism and not socialism. Please go to my store, studio-reykjavik.com, and support capitalism. Vitamin D3. This is a dual supplement that will help with gene expression so your cells are performing properly, help to get rid of cells that are infected. Vitamin D3 helps those cells to go into apoptosis. Vitamin D3 helps with absorbing calcium and building denser bone. And vitamin D3 helps with cardiovascular health. Vitamin B complex. Super important to take if you are 40 years of age or older. This will help to rev up your cellular metabolism, increase your energy levels, produce higher ATP, and protect neurons. Myotrol will help with gene expression to build muscle and maintain muscle. If you're 40 years of age or older, male or female, guess what? You're starting to atrophy and lose muscle mass. Myotrol will help you to maintain and build muscle. If you're an athlete, younger or older, you will also benefit from Myotrol to build muscle and to maintain it. Myotrol has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build and maintain muscle. Good night formula. Take it every night and it'll allow you to get in that 3 to 5 cycle of REM sleep and deep sleep. That's super important. So you're detoxifying your central nervous system. You're going to be well rested and you're consolidating memory. With proper sleep, you are slowing down the aging process and boosting up your immune system and helping with brain function. The Good Night formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower to help with the sleep pattern. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and use discount 5 and get $5 off. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All righty. Now let's switch over to El Nino. According to the experts, this is going to be one of the largest El Ninos on record.
In the ocean, the first signs of El Nino are already being registered. The natural phenomenon, which warms sea surface temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific Ocean, occurs every 2 to 7 years. According to the World Meteorological Organization, there's an 80% chance the next event will occur this summer, with major consequences.
In some regions, it is likely we will see heavy rainfall and floods. In others, drought conditions. We can also expect an increased risk of extreme heat with higher temperatures and shifting precipitation patterns, adding further stress on human health, ecosystems, agriculture, and energy systems.
Scientists also say this new episode could be even more severe. The last El Nino in 2023 to 2024, which meteorologists said was strong, contributed to making 2024 the hottest year on record. The WMO is forecasting above average temperatures in nearly every region of the globe from June through August and beyond.
El Nino conditions will pour fuel on the fire of a warming world. The only effective response is climate action equal to the crisis, ending the addiction to fossil fuels, accelerating the shift to renewables, protecting the most vulnerable, and delivering early warning systems for all.
There's no evidence that climate change increases the frequency or intensity of El Nino events, but it can amplify associated impacts.
Well, to discuss, we're joined now by Dr. Paul Randy, Professor of Atmospheric and Environmental Sciences at the State University of New York at Albany. Good to have you with us this evening, Paul. Talk to us about El Nino itself, what exactly it is, how it differs from normal climate conditions in the Pacific Ocean, how it affects weather patterns.
So you need to start thinking along the equator of the Eastern Pacific Ocean. In that region, normally the winds are coming from east to west, and because of the rotation of the Earth, that draws up cold water from underneath and creates a cold tongue of water along the East Pacific equator. And at the same time, those trade winds blowing from east to west pile up warm water in the Western Pacific. And over time, that builds up and eventually gets displaced back toward the east. You can think of it like sloshing of the water in a bathtub. The warm water floating on the surface of the ocean heads to the Eastern Pacific. And normally it's just a moderate warming over there, and it changes the distribution of rainfall in the tropics. And where it's raining in the tropics, the air comes in, up, and out, and forces changes in the large scale, we call them planetary waves in the atmosphere. These determine where it's warm, where it's cold, where it's wet, where it's dry. And we sit in conditions where some parts of the world are normally dry, but then when El Nino kicks in, they become wet and face flooding and other outcomes. In this particular event, there's a lot of warm water volume available, and it's perhaps more than most past events have had. And just back in April this year, we had strong westerly winds over the Western Pacific that were stronger than any previously recorded event. And these westerly winds happened just to the west of the warmest water. And so they drove an eastward current in the ocean that's moving the warm water that was in the West Pacific toward the east and pushing that normal cold layer that's in the East Pacific down. And this is happening now at a similar rate to what happened in 1997 when we had the strongest event of the last century. And there's some model solutions that are suggesting that this event could achieve an amplitude similar to the strongest event known back in the late 1870s.
So that means we're facing into something that we haven't seen in about 140 years or so. Why is it so strong, Paul? As we say, we normally kind of see this phenomenon every 2 to 7 years. So why do you think this one is going to hit particularly hard?
It's the combination of where the water volume had been accumulated in the Pacific Ocean and where these westerlies were located and the intensity of the westerlies. So they're pushing that warm water from west to east, and that warm water source is roughly half a degree warmer than it was in 1997 during the similar event back then. That warm water will move from west to east across the Pacific, and it will cool a little as it does so. But the models and basic physical arguments, just based on tracking the progress of the warm water as it's moving over the last several weeks, suggest that the amplitude could be as high or potentially higher than any event in the last century.
And we might presume, given the recent heat waves we've had the last few years, and even here in Europe in the last week or two or so, we might presume this is somehow linked to climate change. Is there any evidence that these El Nino events are connected to that? Is a warming planet making them more stronger or more frequent?
There aren't any consistent trends, and climate models aren't particularly good at simulating the rainfall patterns and the wind patterns that drive the observed El Nino conditions. And so it's difficult to be able to predict how this signal will change in response to climate change. But in this particular event, the source water over in the Western Pacific is absolutely warmer than it's been historically. And part of the reason why it's warmer is that the climate has warmed in most parts of the world. In El Nino, we're looking at the contrast between El Nino warm events and La Nina cold events. In La Nina cold events, the East Pacific is colder than normal, and its boundaries are set by the temperature of the water that can be upwelled from deep in the Pacific. And that cold water is the same temperature as it was many decades or even centuries ago. But what's changed is the West Pacific warm water can be higher in response to climate change. Climate change will also impact the rainfall rates along the atmospheric waves that respond and can adjust the amplitude of those features. But the strength of the event itself may have only a small association with climate change.
And the models that you refer to there, is there a risk that they might be underestimating the actual risk linked with the interaction of the two, the El Nino on one hand and global warming on the other? And what should governments be doing to prepare for the possibility that all of this is going to continue to get worse, stronger and more frequent into the future?
So we don't know that El Nino events will become more frequent or even stronger into the future, but there's a possibility that this could happen. But when you're talking about heat events that are generated by El Nino, parts of the world will be cooler than normal in association with the developing event, and parts of the world will be warmer than normal. And those parts that are warmer than normal are stepped up in terms in comparison with the past because the baseline temperature is higher. But El Nino is a normal natural phenomenon, and occasionally it becomes extreme. And when it does, we have to face that by preparing in advance. India has historically had severe droughts associated with El Nino events. The 1877 event was associated with a catastrophe in India and China, where as many as 40 million people died. But today, conditions are so much different. The nation of India has put aside large amounts of grains, food stored to make up for this kind of event. China has stored water in reservoirs. Farmers are able to plant crops today that are better suited for drier climates. The ability to transport food around the world is also improved. So it's unlikely that the world will face an extreme famine this year wherein millions of people die. But it's important that we continue to do the things that we're doing today to be prepared for these kinds of outcomes by nations setting aside food supplies, educating their farmers, and providing access to crops that are more resilient.
And Paul, just finally, why do global temperatures then records tend to occur in the same years that we have this El Nino phenomenon?
Normally, the warm water in the West Pacific is concentrated in a geographically narrow region, and it's deep and out of touch with the atmosphere. During El Nino, that warm water spreads out, and that means that the atmosphere is more in contact with that heat, and we'll call it moisture and heat transfer from the ocean into the atmosphere more readily during El Nino. And that leads to the primary spike in global temperature, which is just from warming the tropics. In addition to that, El Nino modifies where it snows and where the winds blow, where it's stormy. And this further alters the incoming solar radiation and other variations, and can then amplify the warming effect associated with El Nino. But contrast this a little bit, but in very strong El Nino events, the storm tracks are stronger over the North Pacific. And these storm tracks are associated with cooling of the water underneath in the North Pacific. And that can offset some of the globally enhanced temperature effects associated with El Nino. So 2023, 2024 had a huge global temperature spike. in part because the extratropical, the northern mid-latitude regions of the North Pacific did not cool as much that year. This event is likely to be sufficiently strong that it will be able to extract more heat from the mid-latitude oceans and thereby cool the overall surface temperature and offset some of the extreme tropical warmth that we're going to see. So we will see a strong globally averaged spike in temperature, but I don't foresee a catastrophe associated with that because some of those outcomes will be offset by other effects of the El Nino in the middle latitudes.
Well, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for joining us tonight with your expertise on this subject. That's Dr. Paul Harangue, Professor of...
I have noticed across the United States, weather patterns have changed a lot this year. New York, Michigan, Boston, even weather patterns on the West Coast. So there's definitely something happening this year, and you have to be prepared on top of all the other things like the war in the Middle East, higher prices, shortage of gasoline, possibly even a shortage of oil or downstream products that are created from oil, fertilizer. All these things could because these are all different variables, they can be moving in an amplified way on top of the El Nino, where food security will start to go down. So independent on if you subscribe to climate change or not, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The reality is this year, there are a multitude of variables that are happening that could work in tandem and cause a food shortage or reduce food security. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do by getting the cleanse or the Max 35 or Max 14. Now, this is the first pillar to help boost up that immune system, the innate immune system. How does it work? You take a teaspoon a day, swish in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and then swallow. What this does is improve the oral cavity and the oral pharynx. It helps to neutralize, helps the mucosal barrier in maintaining the health of the epithelial cells in your oral pharynx. That's super important to boost up that immune system. I've been doing this protocol for over 6 years every day. Teaspoon a day, every day. Now, if you're not feeling well because of the cold season or allergies or whatever, take a tablespoon or two. And then go back to your maintenance dose when everything's all clear. Omega-3. Omega-3 is super important to take every day for your cardiovascular health. It brings down inflammation and helps you to control your lipid profile, helps to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. That's super important to reduce plaque formation. Vitamin C and magnesium helps with the skin, boosts up your immune system, and helps with brain function. Magnesium also helps with the efficacy of vitamin D3. You can also stack vitamin C and magnesium with my magnesium and zinc supplement. And by doing that, you're boosting up your immune system and your brain function. Magnesium is super important to take as a supplement to improve brain function. And we're in the allergy season. People are cleaning their home, in the basement, in the garage, they're working in the yard. Make sure you have structural nanosilver lozenges in the drops. The moment you have that throat irritation or you're in a dusty area, make sure you take the lozenges to protect your oral pharynx and boost up that immune system. You can get it in Manuka honey, also orange splash that's fortified with vitamin C. And the structural nanosilver drops are in cherry flavor. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the very high quality lozenges and drops. And again, they're for the cold season, the allergy season, and even take them prophylactically if you're cleaning around the house. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into U.S. and Iran exchange strikes and the latest test of fragile ceasefire.
Welcome, I'm Martine Croxall. The tenuous ceasefire between the US and Iran is fraying, with the US forces attacking radar sites and Iranian missiles targeting US bases. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran says it's fired 7 ballistic missiles targeting US bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. It's threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz to gas and oil exports. US Central Command says all missiles and drones were either intercepted or failed to reach their targets. Earlier, the United States military attacked radar sites on Iran's southern coast. These are pictures released by CENTCOM. The war is now nearing its 100th day. Speaking at an event in the US state of Wisconsin, President Trump said it may be ending soon.
We're at a point we're going to come out of Iran very quickly, and it's going to be very strong, one way or the other, whether it's a piece of paper or the very tough way, okay? The very tough way is maybe the easier way.
First of all, Trump, I voted for Trump 3 times. I'm glad he's president, but I'm tired of the way he talks unpresidentially. In addition, he's building this cage, this fighting cage match on the lawn of the White House. I mean, it's just bread and circus. I want him to start acting presidential. We have some big problems. Tariffs aren't fixed. The White House is in a demolition situation. Where's the approval for above ground construction? He's talking about a lot of stuff that is tangential. We still have the war that's going on that's affecting oil prices. I want the president to start acting presidential. He doesn't talk presidential. He doesn't act presidential. It's time. It's time to start acting presidential, not like a street thug. Get the job done.
That's a roundup of the latest developments in the region.
In general, we saw a night that saw the war return back with kind of full power in the Middle East. We saw Israeli attacks on the southern of Lebanon and in Gaza, and also, as you mentioned in your introduction, the tense situation around Strait of Hormuz, where there were 4 Iranian drones were intercepted in this area, and also some raiders, as the U.S. said, in some of the islands in the Strait of Hormuz, and the retaliation from Iran was attacking an air base in Kuwait, attacking parts of the 5th Fleet in Bahrain, and causing also some warnings to American ships in the Gulf, and also even warning airplane carriers, American airplane carriers, in the Gulf, and pushing them down to the Pacific Ocean. So we saw massive military operation in the region overnight.
Meanwhile, in Lebanon, the army says that 7 of its soldiers, including an officer, were killed in an Israeli airstrike on a marked military vehicle in the south of the country. Our correspondent Lena Sinjar has the latest from Beirut.
Israel has not commented on this attack yet, but this is not the first time that...
Again, it goes back to these simple truths that I've been talking about. It's about God, country, and family, and the Enlightenment. And when you have society eroding, don't be surprised a curse comes down. Now, I've been saying this for months, if not more than a year. There's a curse coming on September 11th, 2026. And all of mankind is going to feel it. You can't prep for it. Everyone's going to be affected. It starts on Rosh Hashanah, coinciding with the Sabbath on September 11th, 2026. And it's going to last until about the beginning of October of 2027. And what's going to happen is these variables that we've been covering, finance, the economy, the markets, the climate issue with the El Nino, the oil problem that we have because of the war in the Middle East, crop yields, the tension that is taking place between the United States and Iran, and also Israel and Hezbollah. The tension that's happening within our society, between the liberals and the conservatives, between religious individuals and secular. The world is teetering on a big problem here. And if we don't solve the problem between now and September 11th, a curse is coming. And you can kind of sense it. The market's at an all-time high, and well, it's going to burst. You know, we have these blessings because we've either done something or are supposed to do something to earn it. But don't be surprised when we don't do certain things and we don't earn it. It goes away. You can see that it's starting to emerge, this an amalgamation of variables working in tandem that will cause the event, this big event. You can sense it by watching this news.
Soldiers come under fire throughout this war in the south. But the timing of this attack is really critical. It comes one day after, the U.S., Lebanon and Israel announced, a partial, conditional truce supported by the Americans, and it really leaves little confidence in the army to be able to be deployed in the agreed pilot zones to monitor the situation, because they'll simply be under fire either from Hezbollah or from Israel.
There was a ceasefire deal agreed between Israel and Lebanon, but Hezbollah has rejected it. So where does that leave everyone?
Well, exactly. It leaves us where we're seeing, because, yesterday there were still airstrikes in the south and 18 people killed. Today there's this strike on the Lebanese army, but also to remind our audience that this partial truce that was agreed mainly to stop hostilities and spare the capital Beirut from any attacks. It also provides that Hezbollah should stop any attack on Israel before Israel, continues to stop, any attacks on south of Lebanon. And this agreement also doesn't say anything about the withdrawal of Israeli troops from south of Lebanon. And that's exactly why Hezbollah is using this against the government and saying that they're rejecting this deal categorically. The issue is for the Lebanese government, they feel that they're trapped between either, failure and defeat and by agreeing to this, agreement, or suicidal for the whole country. The government wants a gradual approach to end these hostilities and find, a lasting solution for the South. But Hezbollah is blowing everything in the air with their rejection of this deal.
In Sinjar in Beirut, Dr. Louina Binti Abdul Razak is a lecturer in Iranian history at SOAS University in London. I asked her about the current state of the ceasefire.
Well, at the moment, clearly, there is no ceasefire in place. And I think this sort of speaks to the fundamental problem that the negotiations between the US and Iran had, was different sort of goals. Abbas Araghchi has said that, he's not looking for a ceasefire, but rather a long-term peace. And at the moment, we're seeing these volleys, exchanges of missiles between the US and Iran attacking US bases in Kuwait and Bahrain and so on. And part of me wonders if this could be actually a negotiating tactic on both sides.
In what way? How would that help them?
Well, at the moment, as we know, as we know, the peace talks, the ceasefire talks kind of broke down over the weekend, and it was quite fragile to begin with. So now a little break sort of allows both sides to kind of remind each other what they're capable of. Iran showing that it's able to still limit the kinds of ships that go through the Straits of Hormuz, and the US is able to still, attack Iran if it needs to. So it also sort of, shows what the other side is capable of. And I think, from Trump's statements, we can see that they're still very much open to negotiating with Iran. So it's very possible that these exchange of missiles kind of, brings more to the negotiating table, shows what kind of stakes are actually there.
In fact, President Trump has indicated that he would welcome or be happy to speak to the Iranian supreme leader. But what do we know about the whereabouts and the well-being of the supreme leader? Because he was caught up in those airstrikes in which members of his family were killed at the very beginning.
Exactly, and this is also another fundamental issue: is that key Iranian leaders are at threat. They do face a security threat from potential U.S. and Israeli strikes, and so that's probably one of the reasons why we haven't seen the new supreme leader since his appointment from taking over from his father. So it's a bit of a mystery, to be honest. But I think the Iranian government has shown that it's kind of able to still maintain power, maintain a campaign against the US without him actually showing up. So I think the US is trying to sort of push Iran to reveal Mujtaba, but at the same time, I think they're not going to do this at this point.
Israel has been attacking Lebanon following rocket fire from Hezbollah. How does that part of the conflict affect the prospects of a settlement between Iran and the US?
Well, Iran has been very clear that it wants to tie what happens to Lebanon with what happens in Iran, to Iran. So Iran has shown that this is not just a bilateral issue, it's actually a regional issue. So by tying Lebanon's fate to Iran's fate, it sort of shows that they're not looking for just a simple bilateral solution. It really shows that Iran is looking for a regional solution for its allies, especially Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon, and for Lebanon in general. Yeah. So clearly they want to make it not just a bilateral issue, but a regional one.
Dr. Rowena Binti Abdul Razak from Samat University in London.
I personally think that the United States needs to solve the problem by basically saying, we're not going to be negotiating anymore. You give us the nuclear material or we're going in and taking it. It's that simple. You have 48 hours, 72 hours to do it. No more games. And whatever happens in terms of destruction, so be it. But Iran cannot have nuclear material. But instead, what Trump does is he keeps on kicking the can down the road and wasting time. And now he has Congress telling him he can't continue on in the Middle East. Got to ramp it down. It's done. He wasted the time. But he's a master negotiator. This is what I mean. He spends more time with the bread and circus and trying to play peace negotiator instead of actually solving the problem. And because him kicking the can down the road and doing this long drawn out affair, it made the situation worse. The longer oil prices are high, the more permanent inflation will be baked into the economy. And that will be 100% Trump's fault. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the collagen. This collagen is a month's supply. This will help with your skin, your nails, your hair, your musculature, your bone density, even your joint health. Take it every day. Again, this is a month's supply. Some people will only use about half a scoop, and therefore it'll be a 2-month supply. But one scoop a day is a month's supply. Now, you can take collagen every day separately or stack it with collagen. Now, collagen is really important for individuals that have arthritis and have a sports injury. And what collagen does is it helps to remodel the joint. It'll help to remodel the cartilage and the cushioning of the joint. Block pain gateways called NAV 1.7. It'll also inhibit EP4 to reduce inflammation. And it'll inhibit MMP3 and MMP13, which are enzymes that will erode the joint. So if you block them, you're reducing joint erosion. So by taking the collagen every day, you're actually remodeling the joint. Now you can take it separately, but I recommend stacking it with the collagen. Collagen has the ingredients to remodel. Collagen supercharges that remodeling. So that's how you can look at it. And another way to also improve joint health, especially if you have arthritis or a sports injury, is to do some exercises. If you have a joint, let's say a shoulder joint problem, you want to open it up or move it to a point where you have pain and go a little bit more, however it articulates for the pain, a little bit more than the pain level, right? Count to 20 seconds, then release. Rest, maybe a minute or so, and then do it again. Maybe do that 2 or 3 times a day, right? And when you do that every day, and taking the collagen and the collagen, what you're going to notice is that the joint is actually improving and you'll be able to open it up more before you get pain, up to the point where you'll be able to fully articulate. But it takes time. And the longer you've had this problem with the arthritis or the joint injury, the longer it'll take to remodel. So if you follow my advice, you're going to improve the joint health. Now, for temporary relief, I have a product called Super Strong Relief. You apply it on the area of pain. It's a topical. It works for bruises, muscle pain, tension headaches, sprains, and arthritis, and sports injuries. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Super Strong Relief. And you can stack it. You can take the Super Strong Relief, take the collagen, and the collagen and the collagen, stack them all together. It's a great way to do those joint exercises I just mentioned to help improve your joint health. Now, if you have good articulation with your joints as you go into your geriatric years, guess what? You'll have more mobility. You'll have more vitality. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the collagen, and the Super Strong Relief. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. All right, what does General Keane have to say about the war?
Honest saying no tangible progress is being made in the peace talks as Hezbollah rejects the Israel-Lebanon truce. But President Trump says he's hearing something very different. Why?
I will tell you, they called us and they said, how about stopping? And I think you're going to see things happen over there. That's been like a little bit of a different world, but it's interconnected with Iran. And it would be really nice if Lebanon could have some peace.
The president was referring to Hezbollah called him, but they don't want peace. Let's bring in 4-star General, Fox News senior strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute of Study of War, General Jack Keane. General, it looks like we're being the whole thing is stalled. Any of these peace talks. We're now in our 8th week. Where do you think of a ceasefire? It's supposed to be 2 weeks.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, first of all, let's just start with the fact that in close to 50 years, only one president has taken consequential action against Iran and their predator behavior in the region, and that's President Trump. Obviously, 5 weeks of epic fury and a naval blockade has devastated this regime militarily and economically. But they're down and they're not out. And the truth is, they suggested we go into this diplomatic mode because when they shut down the Straits of Hormuz, they said we can work out a deal and we'll open it up in 2 weeks. Well, here we are 8 weeks later, they never opened it up. And they keep kicking out the idea that we can make a deal. And I think we have to accept the reality that's just not going to happen. They have one motive in mind here: stretch out negotiations as much as possible, get as close to the political situation in terms of midterm elections, and there'll be less likelihood that President Trump would ever pull the trigger and go back to military operations. I believe that is their unstated strategy, their public strategy. Oh, we're going to make a deal. We're interested in making one. I think we have to accept that after 8 weeks, this is really not going to happen. And even if we did make a deal, we can't throw them a financial lifeline that'll help them to recover financially Because then they'll be systematically, in time, reverse everything that they signed on a dotted line saying they would do. And we know that because they've always cheated in the past and they'll cheat in the future. I think we've got to come to the reality that we have to return to military operations. When we stopped, we had about 2 weeks left. And the IDF and Central Command believes they have 10 to 14 days left to be able to finish offensive operations that were assigned to them. And now we actually have more targets. And the reason is because we've been monitoring them for 8 weeks. We have lots of intelligence. And obviously they've been recovering their military capability during these 8 weeks as well. But we've been monitoring it. So what I'm suggesting is if we go back to military operations, and I believe that's the preferred option, I think we should return to full combat operations. There's going to be suggestions we just do a limited operation or a small operation to kind of get their attention. And here's the caution. The caution is Iran's going to retaliate regardless of whether we go small or go big. Let's go big, take down as much of their capabilities as we possibly can, and get these guys as close to collapse as a military operation can possibly achieve. And then with economic pressure, we can put this regime truly on a pathway to collapse. I think that is the best option in front of us.
General, from everything I've read and from what we've seen, I think it's the only option. The other thing that you've been monitoring closely, I always read the Institute of Study of War every single day. It comes out 2 or 3 times a day on all the hot spots in the world. And what Ukraine is doing is the most underreported, fantastic story in the world today. And now President Zelensky, in an open letter to Vladimir Putin, proposes a face-to-face meeting for a full ceasefire as Russia continues to go after civilian targets because they can't hurt the military. Your thoughts about a one-on-one meeting, and maybe you should tell our audience how effective Ukraine has been.
Yeah, well, there's been a major turnaround in the war. Russia has started their spring and summer offensive, and it has failed miserably. They are losing more territory than they have the ability to take. And that means that Ukraine is on the offense and is retaking territory. They've actually also, despite the dominance of drone warfare, which led to positional warfare on the ground as a result of it, no operational maneuver, no tanks, no fighting vehicles, Ukraine has returned to tactical maneuver. They figured out how to suppress Ukraine's drones at the same time maneuver with those tanks supported by artillery and supported by drones, and obviously infantry on the ground. So the war has changed. And for the first time ever, Putin cannot replace the number of casualties he's taken. In other words, he's taken more casualties than he has people to replace them. And obviously that's diminishing returns. And he's in a bind. And economically, he's hurting despite all of the bluster that they have at the St. Petersburg Economic Conference just held recently, telling the world what kind of great shape they are. It's just a bunch of hooey saying they've had 10% growth and they're solid economically. Quite the opposite is taking place here. So Ukraine has a momentum and the war is turned around completely. So this false narrative that Russia's winning the war, let's put that aside. It never was the case, and it surely is not the case now. The advantage and momentum is on the side of Ukraine. Russia is using attacks on civilian populations to deflect and diffuse the international public's awareness of what is actually happening on the ground. And the principal thing they're using to hurt the population is ballistic missiles. And they're doing that because they know Ukraine has a shortage of intercepts in doing that. These, particularly the PAC-3 Patriot intercepts. They fly hundreds of drones at Ukraine. Ukraine takes out 90% of them. Ballistic missiles, 15 to 20% only. The rest are getting through. And some of that obviously is hitting the target. Some miss the target. But the reality is they need intercepts. And what Ukraine is offering, give us the licensing rights to manufacture these PAC-3 intercepts ourselves. They've already made long-range missiles, offensive missiles. They want to build defensive missiles. So we don't need Raytheon or Lockheed Martin to build them for them. They can do it themselves. Just give them the licensing rights. I suggest Ukraine turn back 25% to the United States as a result of the deal. They keep 75%. This is a no-brainer solution.
Yeah.
Let's just get on with it. And it's about Ukraine helping themselves here. And taxpayer, no exchange whatsoever. Ukraine can take care of it. Other things we need to do, certainly outgun them through NATO on the other things that they need, and hit them hard with sanctions. We got Russia taking a knee here. Let's really punish them.
I hear you. General Jack Keane, give them the licenses and let them win. They are the good guys in this, and Putin is losing. He's losing support amongst his own elites too. General Jack Keane, thanks so much.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nanosilver gel either in the tube form or in the quick dispenser. They're dual purpose. If you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, put the gel on the lesion. It'll help to heal it quicker. In addition, you can use it as a daily skincare. Put it on your skin at night. It's a great way to improve the topical health of your skin. If you are working in the yard and you're susceptible to allergies, lightly coat your nostrils with the gel. It'll help to prevent you from getting that allergic reaction. If you're around someone that has a cold or you're not feeling well because of the cold, put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your eyes, around your ears, lightly coat your nostrils. It'll stay active for 5.5 hours. Please go to my store. Make sure you have some at work and have the gel at home. You never know when you need it. It's dual purpose. And use discount 5 and you get $5 off. And lastly, the structural nanosilver toothpaste. Whitens your teeth, freshens your breath, brings down inflammation at the gum line, improves the gum health, neutralizes, and with good oral hygiene, you're also helping with your cardiovascular health. You should be using the structural nanosilver toothpaste every day, but especially during the cold season, because it neutralizes. This is the best toothpaste that you can get. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. That's the end of my broadcast. Thank you for listening. Please help support the work that I do by sharing links, making sure you subscribe to the channels, be a paid member to my Patreon channel and my Substack channel. All these videos are for free. Thank you for helping. And go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the supplements that I offer, slow down the aging process. These are supplements that I take every day to slow down the aging process. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.